Hello, what is going on, guys? Hockey Guy 1 here. Welcome to my review of Batman Begins. So, Batman Begins is directed by Christopher Nolan and stars Christian Bale, Liam Neeson, Katie Holmes, Gary Oldman, Michael Caine, and Cillian Murphy. So the story is basically about Bruce Wayne, who is being trained into the League of Shadows until he ends up deciding to not be with the League of Shadows and burn down the place. And then basically wants to go back to Gotham City to try and basically claim his spot so they can win an Enterprise and basically clean up the streets of it with like this whole Batman armor that Lucius Fox makes for him, and basically has to try and stop Scarecrow from like releasing all this toxin into the air that like makes people go kind of crazy, and he kind of realizes that he works for Ra's al Ghul, and basically has to try and stop Ra's al Ghul from bringing this train into Wayne Enterprise, which would like end up releasing the toxin into the city before everyone kind of like goes crazy. So the story is really good, as it is kind of like adapting an origin story for Batman. And I do think the execution of the ideas of what they wanted to do with the origin story really does work. I mean, they do a lot with this origin story, as basically like, it does show the obviously the normal thing, like where they kill off Martha and Thomas Wayne, Thomas flashback, and it also kind of has like a lot of flashback kind of thing, but they also like kind of show a little bit more, like kind of showing how he was trained in the League of Shadows and where he learned all his martial arts skills from. And I think they do a really good job kind of like progressing at the story, and also in the story like how this entire idea of like him wanting to get Batman to clean up the streets and basically try and stop Scarecrow from releasing this toxin. I think that whole part of the story like really is executed well, and the idea of it makes sense inside his, and does give Batman kind of a reason to want to go out there and try and stop him. The whole structure of the story is really good, as you got the first act, which basically kind of like introduces you to this new universe by showing Batman being trained into the League of Shadows with martial arts before he like fully betrays them, and I think that it really works. I mean, it makes sense to introduce Batman this way, as you're kind of getting like a new version, so they want to like adapt different parts of him and show how he learned all these martial arts. And the second act, basically after like he betrays him, he wants to go back to Gotham City to clean up the streets, and basically they just try and stop Scarecrow from like releasing all these toxins. And I think that makes sense to continue on with the story, and it does kind of like work in the context of the story, and also just the whole thing. He does try to like have a reveal like who he's working for, which ends up being Ra's al Ghul, and I think that makes sense. I mean, it would make sense considering what happened earlier in the film, and it would really make sense that he would want to like hire Scarecrow for this. And then there's like the whole third act, basically, yeah, after Ra's al Ghul burns down Wayne's Manor and puts his whole plan together, like to move this train into the center of Gotham City to try and basically release all this toxin everywhere, or to like turns people. I remember Will Batman has to try it and stop him, and I think that is a really good climax. Makes sense for it to be the top point, and the whole battle is really intense when it's ended. And then basically after that, when he decided to rebuild Wayne's Manor, makes sense for his film, and kind of like being with Rachel, it does make sense. And then the whole cliffhanger ending kind of happened with this movie, where it shows him with the Joker card, basically setting up the Dark Knight and what's to come. I think is a perfect way to like kind of resolve this movie and show you what's going to happen next, and that exactly what they had planned next for the next movie in this trilogy. The pacing is really good, as this movie is pretty long, but it feels like it should be that long, as each scene does connect with each other, and overall it feels like this movie is complete and that they connected each and every scene together. The action scenes are very good, as you kind of like get the scenes where she's kind of like fighting in the League Shadows. Like those are pretty intense, what they are, and basically it's kind of like our training segments kind of things. And then also there's like the kind of action scenes where he's fighting Scarecrow as well. Like that was really good. I mean, they literally set him on fire, and that just kind of like showed to the choreography and like how intense that this trilogy is gonna go, and how dark it's gonna be with its action. And I do feel like that it works for the movie, as it's a kind of does work for what it is. They go kind of like setting on fire kind of thing, and just how intense it is. It adds a lot to the story, and then there's also like the whole climax where he's fighting Ra's al Ghul on the train, and it does feel really good. I mean, it's very intense, as you don't really see anything happen. There's a lot of tension to it, as it basically has to try and stop Ra's al Ghul from basically moving the train in. Otherwise, the entirety of Gotham is going to be filled with this toxin, and basically is scared of a lot of things. And it's just, there's a lot of intensity to this action, and there's a lot to it that adds on to the story, is what really helps it out. Bruce Wayne, or Batman, it's a very well written character. As with this origin story, you get a lot more to it. Like, they do obviously show Thomas and Martha Wayne dying, because like you can't really have a Batman origin story without that. But they definitely add a bit more, like seeing him like fall down into this pit when he's a kid, with like all these bats kind of like flying at him, as well as just the whole martial arts kind of skills, like, which is very needed to see, because like you never really knew why he knew all these things and before in like a previous Batman film, which is kind of like a new idea to put on film, as you never really see how he learned all these martial arts skills. And I do feel like they did do a good job kind of showing how he learned all these martial arts skills, and kind of like all these lessons that were taught to him by Ra's al Ghul. And I just think overall this is a good job with the origin story, and just his whole reason for wanting to clean up the streets of Gotham makes sense, as he doesn't want to happen to his father and his mother to happen to other people, as that does give him a good reason to want to become Batman, and he becomes a superhero, as it makes sense for him to do that. And overall does do very well, and he does pretty much kind of like develop into this kind of hero over time, as he does end up kind of like outsmarting Ra's al Ghul by the end, and wanting to like rebuild Wayne's manor by the end. And basically just the whole message of his character basically is not who he is underneath, but it's what he does that defines him. And I think that whole message of this movie does really help with his character, as you can definitely see it as just basically what it's saying is his character doesn't really matter like who exactly he is underneath, but what defines him is what he does. And I feel like that does really help a lot with his character, and overall like definitely does develop him, and basically kind of like shows how he kind of cares about the city, and without really showing his identity. Alfred is a really well-written character, as he's basically kind of written as kind of like a mentor kind of figure, like the father that Bruce never really had. And I feel like he is pretty well done in that kind of cases. Basically, he's trying to help Bruce, and like with his decisions, trying to tell him that he could have killed something. Like basically try to help him out and stuff. And basically he does get in some arguments with him, but it overall kind of like makes sense, and it does kind of like develop the relationship a bit more, and is kind of done pretty well. And I do think that his relationship with Batman really kind of helps a lot, as basically him versus relationship is basically key to him, as basically he tries to like help him throughout the way, and basically try and like develop kind of with person that he is, and basically help him a bit more. And I do think that as that kind of character, she is pretty well written. Rachel Dawes is also a really well written character, as basically what her character kind of is basically, she is a longtime friend of Bruce, kind of like helps him out with kind of some things, like basically she helped him out with like the whole, it's not who he is underneath, but it's what he does that defines him kind of thing. And she did kind of like tell him that to begin with, and basically kind of help him out to stuff that it doesn't really matter what he does, but it's who exactly he is that defines him. And just her whole relationship with Bruce is done pretty well, as by the end they are kind of like more strong, and they feel like they're kind of like a stronger bond by the end. Lucius Fox is basically this kind of character who helps out Bruce, makes like the whole Batman suit for him, and kind of like helps him with all this equipment. And I do feel like he's pretty well written as that, as you can kind of like see like a lot of his characters. When at first, I think the guy who was in charge didn't really like his ideas, so he fired him. The Bruce ended up hiring him back at the end. And I feel like Lucius Fox, and well, there's not really much to him. That's basically kind of the point of him, and I do feel like that they did a pretty good job with what they did with him. Scarecrow is pretty well written, as he's basically the secondary villain of this movie, and is basically the villain that's on screen for like most of this movie. And I do feel like he is done pretty well for what he is. I mean, I do think that his character is pretty well written, as basically he is kind of like just wants to release the toxin there, so his plan makes sense. And she just kind of like reveal that he's been hired by Ra's al Ghul and to all this thing. And I do feel like when he's on screen, he's pretty intimidating, as basically just kind of like burns Batman on fire, and that kind of like it's intimidating as it is. And Ra's al Ghul is pretty much like the whole main villain of the movie, and I do think that his plan makes sense. I mean, and to like hire Scarecrow to start releasing the toxin, and then can like come in himself when Scarecrow kind of fails. I do feel like the whole plan kind of makes sense, and just the whole plan to like release the toxin in the air makes sense. And I do feel like he's pretty well competent in that kind of plan. And his motivation does make a lot of sense, as, I mean, you can see why he would not really be happy with Bruce or the Gotham City. It's basically, Bruce basically betrayed the League of Shadows, so of course he wouldn't really be happy with him, which is why he kind of like went after him. And I think it really makes sense, because, I mean, obviously Bruce betrayed him in the League of Shadows, so you can see why he's really mad at him. The acting is fantastic, especially from Christian Bale. He does a really good job in this movie, as he just really feel like the character in each and every scene. And when he's Bruce Wayne, he kind of like gives a kind of looking at it. I do feel like he was trying it and felt like the character, and especially when he was Batman. Like, just his whole deep voice does kind of like feel like the Batman, and like make him feel more kind of like into the role, and you can really see how he's into it, as he keeps the same voice consistent throughout. And especially there's Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox. He really felt like the character, and definitely felt like he was trying. And then basically there's also Michael Caine, who played Alfred, really feeling like the character and trying in each and every scene. And then Katie Holmes, well, she did get recasted after this film. I do feel like she did a pretty good job for what she did in this film. And then there's Liam Neeson, who did kind of like have a lot of his other roles, but it still kind of like felt really intimidating when he did it, and definitely like felt like the character. And as well as Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow, she felt really intimidating with each line he said, and I do feel like he was really trying in the role. The visual effects aren't really good, and they didn't really use much CGI in this, as pretty much most effects were practical, and I do feel like they did a really good job, as each actor kind of like did its own stunts mostly, and I do feel like when they did do their own stunts, it really worked, and they did do a good job with them, and overall, like, making the visuals kind of look good, and I do think that they did a really good job with these practical effects, as basically Batman was literally set on fire, and I do feel like they did a pretty good job with that. And I think that was like the only kind of like CGI moment in this film, and I feel like that looked pretty real, and they did a pretty good job with it. And I just feel like it's never seen they kind of like use practical effects, so it's pretty real. The cinematography is really good. Has basically they use a lot of close-ups because a lot of times they're trying to show the characters' emotions, and I do feel like it's done pretty well. And a scene I'd like to point out in specific is like the scene where Batman says it's not who I am underneath, but it's what I do that defines me. Like, that whole scene had really good cinematography as they kind of like show close-ups on Batman's face a lot and kind of like showing his expressions during it, and then also showing like Rachel's reaction close-up to him saying that. And I do feel like that scene specifically has really good cinematography, and I feel like for the most part just about every scene does a pretty good job kind of like showing the characters' emotions when they need to, and also like when they kind of like watch like the whole watch shot during the climax, like in the whole train scene, like there are multiple shots in that I feel like are pretty well done, as it kind of like shows the landscape scene pretty well, and you can definitely see the whole landscape of the scene, and I feel like overall they do a really good job with it. The lighting is very good, as basically a lot of this movie does take place at night, and I do feel like they do a pretty good job lighting it up so that you can see what's going on even if it's at night, and I do think they definitely used enough of the lighting so like here you can see it when it's at night, and the majority of this movie is at night, so I do feel like they did a pretty good job. The editing is really good, as when it feels like it kind of goes to one shot to another, it has a smooth kind of effect, and then as well, the transition to one scene to another feels pretty smooth, and I do feel like that each scene pretty much connects to each other, and overall kind of like doesn't really feel like there's anything really missing out in it, and I do think that overall they did a really good job with the editing, as basically in each scene they do a good job kind of like moving it from each angle, and I think that overall they did a pretty good job with it. The costume designs are really good, like Batman's costume does look a lot like a comic book costume, and I do feel like that it looks pretty good for the most part, and I do think that they did do a good job with the whole kind of the Batman suit in this, and I do think that it looks like it's Batman, and kind of like modernizes the suit kind of, and there's also the Scarecrow's costume, which I mean isn't really much. It's basically just like sack on his head, which it's just pretty much. I mean, that's kind of how I'd expect Scarecrow to look like in real life. So I just feel like they did a pretty good job, kind of making it feel like kind of a realistic kind of Scarecrow. The set designs are very good, as I do really like the looks of Gotham City. It's kind of modernized, and I do feel like it looks like a modern Gotham City. I mean, it's kind of like feels like Gotham City, but it feels a bit more modern, and I like how they kind of do that. And I also like how they basically made Wayne Manor look, and I do think that overall, like the looks of Wayne Manor, like kind of gives a resemblance of kind of like a huge manor, kind of, and rich person manor, and basically, I do think that the looks of the Batmobile looks pretty good, and as well as basically the looks of the Batcave, and it's just kind of like under Wayne's Manor, obviously, and I do really like the looks of it in this one, as it kind of looks kind of like it's obviously in a cave, and it looks a bit more like a modern kind of Batcave, and I do like how they modernize it. The score is very good, as a lot of the time it's like very slow and kind of like epic, and then kind of goes fast, and it can feel epic, and I do feel like that it really works for like the kind of tone of the movie, and as well as like the theme of like this movie and like the whole trilogy. It really works for like the tone of this movie and the trilogy, and I do think that it works overall for this film and the trilogy. It's basically kind of like kind of in and out, kind of slow, and then kind of like gets kind of faster, and I think like it really works for these movies, and I think Hans Zimmer did like a pretty good job with it. With that said, I do have a few small negatives, like some of the flashbacks in like the League of Shadows seems kind of feel a bit out of place, like kind of like this whole kind of thing of like how you have disagreements in Gotham City, and then basically kind of like has like the coat, and it's like coat and exchanges it. And I just feel like that It just kind of feels a bit out of place, like that flashback, and it feels like there's a bit too, and as well, there's also kind of feels like there's a bit too many, which kind of affects a bit of the story and the structure in this film, as it just feel like that. But other than that, I don't really have anything. So overall, Batman Begins is a fantastic start to the Dark Knight trilogy, and I'm gonna give Batman Begins a 9 out of 10. That was my review of Batman Begins. What are your thoughts on Batman Begins? Tell me in the comments below. And thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.